Ryukyu was an independent kingdom in history, and had a close vassal relationship with China during the Ming and Qing dynasties. From 1853 to 1859, the Ryukyu kingdom signed treaties with the United States, France, and the Netherlands, indicating the status of the Ryukyu kingdom as an independent sovereign state. In 1879, the Japanese government illegally and forcibly annexed the kingdom of Ryukyu and renamed Ryukyu to Okinawa Prefecture. The Qing government formally lodged a protest. China and Japan had been negotiating for the status of Ryukyu for several years. Due to the failure of the Sino-Japanese War, China failed to continue the negotiations. On May 8, 2013, People's Daily published on the Treaty of Shimonoseki and the Diaoyu Islands issue co-written by Zhang Haipen and Li Qiuqiang in the political section, which raised the issue of rediscussing the status of Ryukyu, which aroused public opinion abroad. At present, in view of the unrest in East Asia and the Pacific region, the tense relations in the Taiwan Strait region, and the fact that Japan and South Korea are embracing the United States, it is indeed strategic to formally raise the issue of Ryukyu's status. My reasons are as follows. 1. At present, the Ryukyu reconsideration is proposed, and the theoretical conditions are sufficient, the historical facts are clear, and the international law reasons are sufficient. Chinese scholars believe that Ryukyu before 1879 was an independent kingdom with a clear geographical location, population, language, and culture, and a history of more than 1,000 years of development. Since the early Ming dynasty, it has established a close suzerain vassal relationship with China for more than 500 years. The suzerain vassal relationship between China and Ryukyu is that the new king of the Ryukyu kingdom succeeds to the throne and must accept the canonization of the Chinese emperor. This kind of relationship is different from the Western colonial system. In essence, China helps the development of the Ryukyu kingdom in terms of politics, economy, and culture. Tributary relations are essentially economic and trade relations. China does not have a single soldier in Ryukyu, and there are no Chinese officials permanently stationed in Ryukyu. The Chinese government does not interfere in Ryukyu's internal affairs and foreign affairs. The official year of Ryukyu adopts the year name of the Chinese emperor, and the official records use Chinese characters. This is Ryukyu's own choice, and of course it also reflects the attributes of the suzerain vassal relationship. In modern times, the Ryukyu kingdom and the United States, 1854, France, 1855, and the Netherlands, 1859, signed treaties and established diplomatic relations, and the Chinese government expressed support. The text of the treaty is written in Chinese and English, Chinese and French, Chinese and Dutch respectively. At the time of signing, the Ryukyu administrations is the Qing dynasty's Xianfen year. These signings show that in modern international relations, Ryukyu is an independent and sovereign state, and the signings are in full compliance with international law. The Kingdom of Ryukyu was not only an independent country in the pre-modern times, but also an independent and sovereign country in modern Ryukyu. In 1872, the Meiji government of Japan forcibly announced the change of the Ryukyu kingdom to the Ryukyu domain. In 1879, the Japanese government used force to escort the Ryukyu king from Aba to Tokyo, announcing the abolition of the Ryukyu kingdom and changing it to Okinawa Prefecture in Japan. The actions of the Japanese government are illegal and in violation of international law. Without any excuse, an independent sovereign country has been wiped out by force. The king of Ryukyu did not sign the document to destroy the country, and asked the Qing government for assistance many times. The Qing government was overwhelmed and failed to provide effective assistance. But the Qing government never recognized Japan's annexation of Ryukyu. China and Japan have been negotiating the status of Ryukyu for several years without reaching an agreement. In the Sino-Japanese War of 1888 to 1895, China failed, and China had no way to talk about the Ryukyu issue, and the status of Ryukyu became an unsolved issue. At the Cairo Conference in November 1943, U.S. President Roosevelt and Chiang Kai-shek held talks in Cairo and proposed that China would host Ryukyu after the war. Chiang Kai-shek replied that Sino-US co-management did not form a resolution. This shows that both China and the United States believe that Ryukyu is not Japan's territory. The Cairo Declaration stipulates, the purpose of the three countries is to deprive Japan of all the islands in the Pacific Ocean that it has seized or occupied since the beginning of the First World War in 1914, the four northeastern provinces, Taiwan, Penhu Islands, etc., shall be returned to the Republic of China, other lands seized by Japan by force or greed shall also be expelled from Japan. Our three allies are well aware of the slave treatment suffered by the Korean people, and have decided to make Korea free and independent. The 1945 Potsdam Proclamation clearly stipulated that the conditions of the Cairo Declaration must be implemented, and Japan's sovereignty must be limited to Honshu, Hokkaido, Kyushu, Shikoku, and our decision. The island is included. This announcement clearly stipulates that Ryukyu is not part of Japanese territory. On August 15, 1945, the Emperor of Japan announced Japan's surrender and explicitly accepted the Potsdam Proclamation. After the war, according to the San Francisco Peace Treaty led by the United States, Ryukyu was managed by the United States. All of the above shows that the international status of Ryukyu is undecided. In August 1945, the United States occupied the Ryukyu Islands, implemented trusteeship, established the Ryukyu civilian government in Ryukyu, abolished the name of Okinawa, and used the name of Ryukyu. This is an expression of not recognizing Japan's annexation of Ryukyu. In 1972, due to changes in the international situation, the United States handed over the administrative management of Ryukyu to Japan, but the sovereignty of Ryukyu was still suspended. Since then, although Japan has reset Ryukyu to Okinawa County, it has not resolved the status of Ryukyu. It can be concluded that Japan's annexation of Ryukyu in 1879 was illegal and violated international law. The two most important international documents, the Cairo Declaration and the Potsdam Proclamation, both deny that Ryukyu is Japan's territory. After 1972, Japan resettled Okinawa Prefecture, which did not resolve the issue of Ryukyu's independent and sovereign status in international law. Ryukyu has established close political, economic, and cultural relations with China for 500 years. The Qing government negotiated with Japan on the status of Ryukyu for several years without reaching an agreement. The United States does not actually recognize Japan's sovereignty over Ryukyu. Ryukyu has become an independent country in the Pacific Ocean, which is extremely important to China's maritime development strategy. The time has come for China to consider Ryukyu's independent statehood as a strategic issue. Aboe and Gintaka Shinichi's Sino-Japanese Common History Research Report, Beijing, Social Science Literature Publishing House, 2015, has officially announced the basic views on the status of Ryukyu between China and Japan. Zhang Haipen and Li Kuoqiang published on the Treaty of Shimonoseki and the Diaoyu Islands issue, People's Daily on May 8, 2013. Yai Wei formally lodged a protest to the Chinese government, and the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of my country, Hua Chunying, rejected Japan's protest. News media at home and abroad have written enough articles on this, forming an atmosphere of public opinion. The Chinese and Japanese governments and societies have already made psychological preparations. Second, there are many domestic contradictions in Japan. The contradictions and conflicts between constitutional protection and constitutional division have formed a state of social and political confrontation. The contradictions and conflicts between security and anti-security have contributed to the continuous rise of democratic anti-war forces in society. The differences and oppositions in historical understanding are manifested in many aspects of social, political, cultural, and education. The U.S. military base in Okinawa and the identity of the Ryukyu people have strengthened the local people's sense of crisis like the Okinawa War. The combination of the identity of the Ryukyu people and the Ryukyu people's independent consciousness that has existed since modern times has led to the current people in the region resolutely opposing the U.S. military base. Demands for self-determination rights and Ryukyu independence continue to rise. The Ryukyu independence and self-government movement is on the rise, troubling the Japanese government. The elites of the Ryukyu society, university professors, citizens, and other strata gradually formed a consensus. The Self-Reliance and Self-Government faction uses the slogan "Strive for the right to decide for yourself" and is a local powerful faction in Ryukyu. This faction criticized Japan's current policy in Okinawa, questioned the legitimacy of Japan's merger of Ryukyu in modern times, and advocated the defense of Ryukyu's history and culture. Members include MPs from various political parties, industrialists, university professors, etc. The independence faction used the slogan "Ryukyu Independence" to directly criticize the colonial nature of Japan's annexation of Ryukyu and demand the restoration of Ryukyu's sovereign status. The faction currently does not have an advantage in terms of numbers, but its influence and development prospects are promising. The centrists not only agree to retain the Japanese political situation, but also agree with the identity of the Ryukyu people. Those who immigrated to Ryukyu from Japan recognized Japan's sovereign rule over the archipelago and recognized their Japanese identity. The current governor of Okinawa, Tamari Dani, advocates autonomy and opposes the U.S. military base. The former governor Ong Chang publicly stated his self-government stance, and the former governor Daejeon changed from the self-reliance camp to the independence camp. A group of university professors are the backbone and frontier driving force of the independence and self-government movement. Celebrities such as the descendants of the former leader of the Japanese Communist Party Koichi Takeda and the descendants of the martyr Lin Shigong participated. In recent years, various protests involving more than 100,000 or tens of thousands of people have shown the profound public opinion foundation of the independence and self-government movement. Local Japanese politicians Yukio Hatoyama and Yahei Kono have a close relationship with Okinawa. Nobel Prize winner Kenzaburo Oe, famous animator Hayao Miyazaki and others have given deep sympathy to the independence faction and self-government faction. The anti-U.S. base movement in Okinawa has continued to develop over the years and has a huge momentum. It can be regarded as an integral part of the independence and self-government movement. The anti-base movement has reached a scale and influence similar to that of the anti-security movement in the 1960s. People in the Henoko area have persisted in obstructing and protesting at the construction site for several years. The anti-base movement is directly related to major national political and diplomatic issues such as the Japan-US alliance and the presence of the U.S. military in the Asia-Pacific region. The ideological theories and slogans of the independence and self-government faction mainly include, restore the right of self-determination, independence of Ryukyu, illegal punishment of Ryukyu in 1879, the 1972 US-Japan Return Agreement did not resolve the ownership of sovereignty, don't be a military colony, the three treaties including the United States and Ryukyu in 1854 proved that Ryukyu is an independent country and so on, which had the upper hand in propaganda and made the Japanese government quite passive. The Ryukyu independence and self-government movement showed a trend of accelerating internationalization. Including Governor Ong Chang, members of the Senate and other political figures, industrialists, scholars, and professors, went to the United Nations Human Rights Organization meeting in batches to expose the essence of the Japanese government's anti-human rights and anti-cultural policies towards Ryukyu people and Koreans in Japan. The Ryukyu local newspapers are centered on Ryukyu Shinpo and Okinawa Times, and are supported by Tokyo's Asahi Shimbun and other media. In addition, in 2014, the newly created Ryukyu Independent Studies and the Old Magazine, translatable The Arc of Ryukyu has been published for nearly 20 years, and many other newspapers and periodicals advocating independence or self-reliance, as well as a large number of articles and works, show that the ideas of the independence faction and self-government faction have been theoreticalized, systematized, and popularized. On May 15, 2013, the Ryukyu National Independence Comprehensive Research Society was established, rekindling the torch of Ryukyu independence. This is the highest average educational level and the youngest among all Ryukyu self-determination movement groups after the war. The thinking and propositions of the leaders of this group are more mature than those of previous activists. This is reflected in the treatment of Taiwan independence and the ownership of the Diaoyu Islands. On October 22, 2017, the Ryukyu National Independence Comprehensive Research Society revised its charter and deleted other independence movements previously listed, including Taiwan independence. The Ryukyu Independence Association did not regard the Diaoyu Islands as an important issue from the very beginning. One of its founders, Yasakatsu Matsushima, even wrote a monograph Island of the Empire, published in July 2020, for this purpose. Jurisprudence publicly maintains that the Diaoyu Islands belong to China. As a result, the two obstacles between the Chinese people and the Ryukyu people were removed. This allows Ryukyu self-determination to go in the same direction as the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Of course, the awareness of ordinary people in Ryukyu is still at the level of anti-base and has not been raised to self-determination and independence. The leaders of the Ryukyu Independence Association are very pragmatic in cooperating with other anti-base people or groups, and have not asked everyone to support self-determination and independence at this stage. The general view in Ryukyu is that the future of Ryukyu can only really see the light of day when China is strong enough to redominate the international order in East Asia. Third, it is feasible to raise the Ryukyu issue at present. The Ryukyu issue is an issue left over from history between China and Japan, and it is also an issue left over from history after World War II. Both are directly related to China, and China cannot help but care. The Ryukyu issue was also the colonial issue in the speech of former Japanese Prime Minister Tomiichi Murayama. The Ryukyu Kingdom was annexed and became Japan's first overseas colony in modern times, which is the historical crime of Japanese militarism. To liquidate the guilt of Japanese militarism must be linked to the handling of the Ryukyu issue. The sovereignty of Ryukyu is undecided, which is a legacy of World War II and its post-war disposal. As a participating country of international treaties, as an irreplaceable member of countries that defeated fascism, and as a sponsor and permanent member of the United Nations, China has the right to intervene. Raising the Ryukyu issue is by no means an interference in Japan's internal affairs. In principle, the Ryukyu issue is an international issue, not a domestic issue in Japan. The above are the strategic and international legal basis for raising the Ryukyu renegotiation issue. In my opinion, in Sino-Japanese relations, it should be possible to raise the issue of Ryukyu status renegotiation from a strategic point of view. It is tenable in terms of jurisprudence and historical facts. Of course, such a major strategic issue cannot be resolved in 1 or 2 visits, and it is unlikely to be resolved in the short term. It is our responsibility to support Ryukyu's self-determination and oppose Taiwan's independence. In my opinion, when our leaders visit Japan, they should care about the issue of Ryukyu autonomy and the deployment of military facilities by the Japanese government in various parts of Ryukyu. Relevant Chinese government departments should support the Ryukyu autonomy movement and support the transformation of the Okinawa County Office into the Ryukyu autonomous government. The most important thing is the United States. The current Sino-US relations are tense, and the US will definitely favor Japan on the Ryukyu issue. However, raising the Ryukyu rediscussion issue may deepen the conflict between the United States and Japan. Raising the issue of Ryukyu rediscussion is also trying to gradually squeeze the US military base out of Ryukyu. In the long run, the United States does not necessarily oppose the independence of Ryukyu. Since Ryukyu has historically been friendly with North Korea, it is estimated that South Korea will not object to the issue of Ryukyu independence. In the short term, strive for the realization of Ryukyu's autonomy. For the long-term goal, strive for Ryukyu's independent statehood, and form a situation of China, Japan, South Korea, North Korea, and Ryukyu in East Asia, which is beneficial to China's interests in East Asia. The Ryukyu reconsideration issue is raised to support Ryukyu's self-determination, not to use Ryukyu's self-determination, not to support Ryukyu's self-determination to oppose Japan, nor to abandon the Ryukyu people's self-determination interests for the sake of Sino-Japanese friendship. We have to deal with Sino-Japanese relations separately from Ryukyu self-determination. From China's point of view, Sino-Japanese relations are Sino-Japanese relations, and the Ryukyu issue is Ryukyu issue. We will not damage Sino-Japanese relations because of the Ryukyu renegotiation, nor should we put the Ryukyu issue aside because of emphasizing Sino-Japanese relations. To raise the Ryukyu issue today must be based on the historical friendship between China and Ryukyu of more than 500 years, and we must shoulder the historical responsibility that we could not take into account when Japan annexed Ryukyu in 1879. Restoring Ryukyu as a subject of international law is not for the purpose of taking Ryukyu under Chinese ownership. It must be understood that during those 500 years, Ryukyu was also an independent country. Although it established a vassal relationship with China, Ryukyu was not part of China's territory. It is China's historical responsibility to care for Ryukyu and respond to its demands for self-determination, and it is also the responsibility entrusted to China by the Cairo Declaration and Potsdam Proclamation. We will never treat Ryukyu as a chess piece, instigate Ryukyu to oppose Japan and damage Sino-Japanese relations. Only by adhering to this position can the cause of the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation stand on the commanding heights of morality and justice in international relations in East Asia. If we advocate the recovery of Ryukyu, it will show that China has selfish purposes, and thus lose the high ground of international morality. It is not advisable to give others an excuse internationally. Today, in order to fight back against American hegemony, against Japanese right-wingers, and against Taiwan independence separatism, we must immediately start cooperating with people with lofty ideals who have national consciousness among the Ryukyu people, and we must not sacrifice the long-term well-being of the Ryukyu people for short-term interests. Otherwise, it will be passive in the long run and the consequences will be irreversible.